This is the story of the way that Dover Harbour has adapted and changed to meet the hugely increased demands of the 20th century. For more than 400 years, all cross-channel traffic used Dover's western docks. Foot passengers embarked from the quays, and later from trains which ran along the piers. In 1928, the age of the car ferry began, when Captain Townsend started his service from the First World War camber by the Eastern Arm. The Artificer could hold 15 cars which were loaded by crane. It was later replaced by the Ford, which carried 28 cars and 168 passengers. Southern Railway responded to this challenge by launching its own car ferry service, and then, in 1929, they introduced the luxury London to Paris train service, the Golden Arrow. The Golden Arrow used the famous passenger ferry, the Canterbury. In 1936, Dover Harbour Board opened a new facility, the train ferry dock, and 3 new train ferries, the Twickenham, Hampton and Shepperton, went into service. A night train ferry service also began in the same year. The steam-powered dock was officially opened by the French ambassador, and the Hampton was the first of the 3 new train ferries to use it. After the war, in 1950, Townsend introduced the first drive-on ferry, the Hallidale, which was closely followed by British Rail's Lord Warden. To cater for these ships, Dover Harbour Board built 2 new berths with car ramps in the camber at the Eastern Arm. These were opened in 1953, and they were used for the next few years by 4 car ferries, the Hallidale, the Lord Warden, the Dinard, and the Princess Josephine Charlotte. In the 1960s, car traffic boomed, and, in order to make more room, Dover Harbour Board began to clear away the dockside industries like the shipbreakers' yard. The Parker Pen factory, which produced its famous brands of ink and pens, was demolished. And the coal bunkering, which had been located by the eastern arm, also had to go. With the new space available from this clearance, Dover Harbour Board was able to improve passenger facilities. And in 1966, they built a new third berth, a double-decker, at which it was possible to load and unload simultaneously. Dover's new eastern docks and its car ferry service grew rapidly. Many new ships were soon joining the fleets. These included the elegant Maid of Kent in 1959. In 1962, Townsend introduced the Free Enterprise, the first of the Enterprise fleet. The Free Enterprise II joined in 1965. This was the first drive-through ferry, where cars drove on at one end and off through the other. The French ship Chantilly joined in 1966, the first with deck escalators and TV lounges. And British Rail's Vortigern, the first multi-purpose ship, able to take passengers, cars and trains, came into service in 1969. The western docks were still the main terminal for rail passengers crossing the Channel, using passenger-only ships like the Invicta. But numbers were falling, and Dover Harbour Board began to develop the western docks for freight and bulk materials, clearing away the old Victorian slums of the Pier District. 1966 saw a 600% rise in freight traffic. And in 1968, the London-Paris Freightliner service began on the train ferry. In 1972, the Golden Arrow service ended after 43 years of first-class travel for London to Paris rail passengers. And the Golden Arrow ship Invicta made her last voyage. In 1959, Christopher Cockerell's hovercraft, the SRN-1, had crossed the Channel and landed at Dover. An experimental passenger hovercraft service was started at the Eastern Docks by Townsend's in 1966, using the Britannia. But there was no regular service until 1968. When Dover Harbour Board reclaimed 5.5 acres at the Eastern Docks for a hovercraft ramp. The service was launched by Her Royal Highness the Princess Margaret, who named the world's first car ferry hovercraft after herself. This service ran from Dover to Boulogne. The hovercraft proved very popular. New, larger hovercraft were planned, a service to Calais started, and the number of flights increased. In 1976, to accommodate this increase, Dover Harbour Board began to build a new hoverport at the Western Docks, reclaiming 15 acres of the old basin. This was opened in 1978. By the 1970s, passenger, car and freight traffic had reached incredible volumes. New berths were required to handle the numbers, but, more importantly, something needed to be done about the traffic, which in the summer brought Dover to a standstill. Every road through the town became blocked. In 1974, work began on the A2 bypass, which would take traffic directly to the port from outside the town. Completed in 1977, the new road was named Jubilee Way to celebrate the Queen's Silver Jubilee. '76 saw a new ferry operator arrive at the port. P&O Normandy ferries began their service with the Lion. This was followed in 1978 by the Tiger. In 1986, P&O took over Townsend Torreson. The last ship to be launched in Townsend's colours was the Pride of Dover in 1987. She was soon joined by her sister ship, the Pride of Calais, the first launched in the colours of P&O European ferries. The eastern docks continued to grow to meet the ever-growing demand. A fourth berth was added in 1973, and more sea reclaimed for a freight area. A new freight berth was added in 1975. In 1970, the new passenger terminal was opened. In 1982, more land was reclaimed as a lorry park, and new freight berths were built. Coach traffic rose considerably in the 1970s, and in 1984 the Harbour Board opened a new coach and passenger terminal. In the same year, part of the old Camber was filled in for a new export freight area. When the original 1953 berths 1 and 2 closed in 1987, the entire Camber area was filled in, and the new Dover cargo terminal built on the site and opened in 1990. Berths 1 and 2 were demolished, and 2 new berths built, as well as new access roads and a flyover. A new way of crossing the Channel began in 1981. In 1968, a Russian hydrofoil had visited Dover in an attempt to sell it to ferry operators. But it wasn't until 1981 that the first passenger service began with the Ostend jetfoil Princess Clementine. The threat of the Channel Tunnel has forced Dover Harbour Board and the ferry companies to rationalise and reorganise. The train ferry dock was replaced in 1988 and finally closed in 1995. The Dover-Boulogne service ended in 1993, and the Dover-Ostend service closed in 1994. This meant that there were no more passenger services running from the western docks, and Dover Marine Railway Station closed with a nostalgic ceremony in 1994. As part of a long-term redevelopment of the Western Docks into a leisure and residential area, new facilities for yachts have been provided in the Granville Dock area. At the Eastern Docks, the new cargo terminal has dramatically increased imports and exports, and it now handles the big refrigerated reefer ships, bringing in fruit and vegetables. The ferry companies are investing in new, bigger and faster super ferries, and there is now a sailing every 15 minutes, all day, every day. The marine station has undergone a transformation to be converted into a cruise liner terminal. This terminal opened in May 1996. Over 100 visits will be made by cruise ships to Dover in 1996. And a number of cruise companies are using Dover as their permanent UK base. Amongst these are Fred Olsen, with its ship, the Black Prince. For 3,000 years, people have used the harbour at Dover. Demand is always changing, and Dover Harbour has always adapted to meet and anticipate the changes. And that is why Dover Harbour has always been the gateway to England, and probably always will be.